Well, thank you. Like Nancy said, it's kind of getting to come home a little bit. I actually was here in Arizona as the state tribal liaison in 1996 to 2000, and I got to do and see some of the work here on San Carlos, so I'm really, really excited about tomorrow and getting out to see some of that stuff. So again, I want to thank the San Carlos Apache tribe. What an amazing, I think when I was here, the casino was just getting finished, and to see what the tribe has done is really, really inspiring. So I was been asked, I kind of wondered how did I get on this panel, and I kind of know the insight now with the Washington group, and I do appreciate that. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about leadership and kind of what I have done through my life and what I have learned, and hope to inspire those about knowing who you are. So one of the things, a little bit, she kind of went through a little bit of my career, and again, just my traditional federal employee and career. She kind of went through all of that. And I think one of the things I learned as I went along in my career was, what are we doing about tribes? I got to USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, and in the 1990 Farm Bill, tribes were mentioned in one sentence in about a 6,000-page document. And in my mind, I thought, wow, as big as our land bases are and we're not in USDA's legislation. So I thought, well, I could sit back and I can just do my job, or I could look and see what I could do to help my agency understand tribes and where I came from. So some of the things that I've done as for myself and where I was raised and how I was raised was I had one standard that I set, and I told all of my supervisors that I worked with was you need to understand where I come from. Where I come from, I go home 4 times a year. I have ceremonies, and those are important to me. To be able to go home during our powwow when everybody comes home, that's our Christmas, is our powwow. To be able to be with my family and things like that, that was one of those rules. And one of those rules that I stood strong on if the agency wanted me to stay. So one of the things that I've learned through my culture is to desire to make a difference with my individuals, family, and community. And I think it's very, very important that we represent our community. And believe me, I've had situations even within the agency, I've been told, well, you only push Indian stuff. Well, that's where I come from, that's who I am. If I can share my, where I come from, that will help other people to understand how can we work with tribes better. My grandfather always said, have a vision and cultivate it. My grandpa always talked to me about college. And, you know, I had to be honest, when I got into college, I didn't realize college was an option. Grandpa just always talked about it. Actually, when I was younger, I wanted to be a horse trainer. I come from a family where we have a lot of horses, about 150 head of horses. And I thought, cool, I want to go to the tracks. Well, Grandpa said, you don't have to have a college education for that. You got to pick something else. So I picked something else and went into range management. But I got to tell you, I didn't think that my range management degree would get me in the position I am now. I'd have never dreamt that I could be where I'm at. And as I moved up and I got experience in the agency, and especially like when I got here in Arizona and saw, I would say, the lack of authority I had, and I couldn't really get anybody to do anything. I had to convince everybody to do it. I got to a point where I got to get to a point where I can tell people they have to do it. So I moved up. So one of the things I learned, take a risk. Don't be afraid to get out of your box. I got to tell you, when I first got with the agency, I kind of told them was I would never leave my home. I'd never leave my mountains. There's no way I'd ever go to another state. And as you heard from my background, I've been in many states. So I had to take a risk. I had to realize that home is always home, and home will always be there. My family's always there. My ranch, the land, always there. So I had to learn, and I had to be able to get out and help other people. And I always say, live your culture and heritage. I have this rule that if the agency ever asked me to choose between my heritage, my culture, and who I am, then it's time to leave. And as you heard, I have to update my bio. I've actually got 27 years in with the agency, so I'm still here. One of the things that I've done, and I tried to do, again, giving back to my community was really, really important to me. So when I talked to the agency about this group called the American Indian Science and Engineering Society, ACES, ACES was extremely important to me because, as you can see, I was one of the first to go to the International Science Fair, but I also was my first experience flying, believe it or not. It was my first experience of seeing off the reservation and having that experience. And so this group became my family away from home when I left to go to the university, because I went to a university that we were lucky if we had 300 Indian students. My dad went to the same university and he was one of 5 during his generation. So to leave the reservation and not understand how things work, this group became it. So I was able to go to the agency and say, hey, by the way, there's this really cool group and they really have a high standard for students. Here's something we can do. And I'm proud to report that our agency is a national sponsor of this society. And we are actually, when you look at our parity numbers for American Indian employees, we exceed it. And it's because of what we were able to do here. And I've been a part of this recruiting cadre. And I think one of my greatest moments in my career was I used to go to these career fairs and as a college student, and I would think, wow, where are the tribal people? A lot of non-native people recruiting us from Boeing and Kodak and BIA and everybody else is there, but there wasn't a lot of tribal people on the other side of the table saying, come work for us. And so I made a promise and I made a vow that I would go back and be one of those people to offer jobs to the students. And I'm really, really proud of our agency, and they've stood by it for about 15 years now. And I was able to actually do an interview and do an actual interview with one of my own people from our own community college. That was a good day. That was a good day. I said, take a risk. I got as far as out of box as I could. I went to Rhode Island. Got to understand there's a lot difference between the oysters I know and the oysters they know. I learned a lot, I'll tell you. My dad said, how is this getting you closer to home? And I said, well, Dad, if they give me this job, I'll be doing the job, and when a job comes back west, they'll have a hard time turning me down, and it worked. It did work. So I went to Rhode Island for 3 years, or almost 4 years, and it was quite different environment. It was a different environment, and it really gave me the exposure. The other reason I went to Rhode Island is I needed to work in a state that didn't have a lot of tribes. Because what I was feeling from the agency was they were pigeonholing me for tribal things only. Not that that's bad, but I also know I was more than that. I just needed that opportunity to show people that I could do more than just the tribal stuff. And so I went to Rhode Island. The question I got asked in Rhode Island just floored me. Are you a real Indian? I thought, what does that mean? I don't have a clue what that means. I didn't know how to answer that question because there are tribes in the East. And so that was an interesting dynamic to work through with the governor and the politicians and things like that there. Again, one of my values is to understand who I am, to know who you are, and never forget where you come from. This is a picture of my great-great-grandpa rides at the door. And Grandpa, I'm fortunate and blessed that I live and grew up on the same original allotment. So I got to see my grandparents' houses, great-great-grandpa's house, my great-grandpa's house, my grandpa's house, my mom and dad's house, and I'm hoping to go back and build my own there. But because of that, and I knew who he was, I know the values that he instilled in us as a family. that I've always held tight to those, no matter where I go and where the agency takes me, in a sense. I hang on to that. And I always go home. Even when I got asked the state conservationist job in Rhode Island, I told the chief of the agency, I said, you do understand I have a rule. I gotta go home 4 times a year. And he was very, very supportive of it and very, very good about it. Have pride in yourself and all those that came before you. Know your responsibility in relationship with your relatives alive and past. I always think about that. I think when I'm doing the things that I'm doing, I realize that I'm blessed in the fact that I'm still here. What do I mean by that? Think about how many of our ancestors died from smallpox. Think about how many families were completely wiped out because of disease, the military and all that stuff, and we're still here. And we're still here. And I think about that I have a responsibility to represent myself and my family as best as I can. To me, this is key. Know where you come from. You know, I'm very proud of what San Carlos did to make the fight for Oaks Flats. Wow. Because I get it. I'm Blackfeet. And we just had a ruling a couple of weeks ago, too, about a sacred area where Obama pulled the leases, and we're ecstatic. I know where I come from. One of 6 tribes that are still on the original homeland. The mountain you see there, most of you, if you've ever come to my territory, you've gone through Glacier National Park, and you probably have gone through Going to the Sun. This mountain at the top, where the informational booth, is one of the most sacred places to my people, because it's this mountain that we came out of. It is this mountain that our Creator's son, Nape, came out of and went into. This is the mountain that he will come back through. That's how important that place is to us. So I'm fortunate and blessed that I have those places around me. So when I start to feel I need to be grounded, I go home and I go to these places. Again, share major values with others. That's our way. Maintain your spirituality and observe and listen more than you talk, and realize that everyone is born for a reason and a purpose to fulfill in life. And again, one of the things I've done when I got with the agency, I was on the agency 8 months or 9 months. And I got asked, would you be willing to be a part of a team that puts together a culture awareness workshop of how to teach our employees how to work with tribes? And I said, absolutely. And I've been the coordinator of that workshop for over 26 years. We've been in about 40 states, and about 8,000 to 9,000 different employees have come through our session. And what we do for that week is we actually bring Indian people, or we bring the government people into Indian reservations and have the tribes tell their story. But where we come in as a teaching cadre is we're that federal employee sitting right next to them. We're the one that's in the office with them. We help to make that personal connection that this is how this treaty affects us. This is how it affects our home, our people, our land, our communities. And so here you see in my regalia that I made. This is a dress that I'm very honored to wear, because the design that you see is my grandma's. And I'm very honored to wear her colors. I didn't know my grandma. She passed away on my 2nd birthday. But I always heard people in my community talk about her. And I always wondered, how was she? And I always get told, she's just like you. And so I'm very, very honored. And so I use my regalia to teach. I don't do powwows. I do it to teach. And I'm honored on my regalia. I was honored with elk ivories. And most of you know, an elk has 2. I now have 65 elk ivories on my dress that have been gifted to me. And what an honor to be gifted those from an elder that I worked with. And I'll show you him in just a moment. That's Louis. and Louis was an elder from Cayuse or Umatilla. And Louis passed away about 5 years. But I gotta tell you, he taught me a lot. Listen to your elders. He's the one that taught me the lessons about Mother Earth. Cool, clean water is the foundation. He always said, one day I went back into detail into Washington, D.C. for a couple of weeks, and I couldn't understand why I was so frustrated, because I couldn't get them to understand. And he said, my girl, he said, you know what your problem is? He said, you're trying to get them to take a white man's law and put it into Mother Nature's law, and they don't fit. And I thought, dang, he's right. That's exactly it. Because I was trying to get them to understand what they were trying to put into the Farm Bill didn't follow Mother Nature, didn't follow the laws out there. Again, he always said, hope for a new day, give in heart, courage to stand for what's right, and the humor to laugh at yourself. He always said that. Never be afraid to laugh. Always, always make time for spirituality no matter what level you're at and where you're at. Louis actually had us as a part of our, we formed an American Indian Employees Association for our agency is one of the things that we did. And Millie Titla's here, and she's one of the past presidents too, along with myself. And our organization, we tried to bring the tribal people together in our agency to provide that support. And one of the things we did was we do a lot of things as a part of our association. One of them we do is a giveaway. Louis had us do a giveaway, and that was to educate everybody else that was coming. So have discipline. Don't make a promise you can't keep. Be open to change, solicit input and feedback. And I will tell you, as a leader, this is extremely important to me. I just got done visiting all about 180 employees I have in my state in Washington the last couple of weeks. And I sit down every year. I have an email box that it's called Employees Connection, and they can send it straight to me. I'm always, always open to input and feedback. Deal with issues and don't dump issues on others. That's been an interesting one. When I got to Rhode Island, I inherited a lot of issues there. And I learned a lot of, like you said, so you don't dump. Don't be afraid to correct your wrongs. I always tell my staff, please give me all the information and the data up front. If you don't, if we're going along and doing something for a couple of months and it's not right, I won't change it. I don't have a problem going back and said, you know what, I made the wrong decision. Maintain the truth and honesty and integrity. So what I want to talk a little bit about is some of the things you kind of see in my values, kind of where I came from, and that kind of stuff, and what I'm trying to do in my state and through my agency support to try and maintain this leadership stuff. So one of the things we have in Washington is our tribes, the Northwest Tribe, issued a paper called Treaty Right at Risk to the White House, and I happen to be a co-chair of that group. And one of the things they brought forward was the issues of not recognizing their treaty rights. And it's been really, really interesting to not only educate other agencies, but even educating other people in Washington State what treaties are. That's been really flooring to me, to get to a state where the tribes are very strong and very vocal and very out there, and yet you still have entities, groups, and other things that just don't understand it. So one of the things that the tribes did was in 2011, I'm sorry, they turned around and issued a paper called the Treaty Right at Risk, and it went to CEQ, the White House area. And so one of the things, really looking and standing up for their treaty rights for salmon and things like that, and it's been really quite interesting, again, people not understanding. So one of the things that I've tried to do, as I told you, tell our story. As I told you in those values, how do we educate other people? So one of the things that I've been trying to do is educate some of the other groups, like the cattlemen, the wheat growers, the grain growers, the dairy federations. I've actually spent time with all of these leaders. Most people don't know, but there's actually soil conservation districts in every county, almost every county in the country. They're an organization that is of 5 volunteers, and they're usually farmers and ranchers. But they have a huge say in the Farm Bill, that's the legislation that dictates USDA money. And so this past year, we actually had a training for those district supervisors in our state. And we brought in tribal leaders and tribal people to talk to them and educate them about treaties and tribes. And it was absolutely amazing. Out of all the sessions I've done across the country, which I've done many, that was the best session. Why those people were there, they were volunteers, but the light bulb started coming on like, wow, we had no idea. And so it was really, really cool. We had about 50 or so people there, and we're planning on doing a week-long training this summer also. So one of the things we're looking at is, really how can we sit with tribes and learn about their concerns and issues, and what can we do to help address some of their concerns. So we were able to apply for additional funds, which we call them future direction funds, and we targeted salmon, is what we did, based on the requests we got from the tribes. So you can kind of see here some of the logistics and the numbers that help to get some of that on the ground. Another project, this is with the Tulalip tribe. This was a really cool tribe. If you ever get to Washington and you go north of Seattle on I-5, right before you get to Marysville is this project. And this year, after, well, you can see 1996 was the first time we purchased the conservation easement. So we as an agency do conservation projects, but we also have easement programs that purchase, basically purchase development right kind of thing. And so we started that with the Tulalip, and they broke the dike this summer. They actually breached the dike. So they let the salt water come back in. So this is over 250, actually there's 400 acres total in this project that now is actually, we're hoping to be salmon habitat and other habitat out there. But there were about 16 different partners in this actual project. It was really cool. So we went in there, we did islands. We had to move back a dike because we had to protect the town. Marysville wouldn't have been real pleased if we would have flooded them out. So we did have to move back the dike and that kind of stuff. So again, just kind of you can see the breach in the dike there. Really, really cool now because the tide's now going in and out. It's so funny how people will complain and say, now it's going to flood us out, because it is getting close to town. The town's just right back in the background. But so far, it's gone really well, and you're starting to see the vegetation already change in a short time. So one of the things, key to holding treaty rights, tribes can and continue to hold federal government accountable for those treaties. And it's been really, really good to have what we call the treaty right at risk at the table, because it's an opportunity to talk with tribes on a regular basis of what is the issues, what are the concerns out there, and how do we turn around and as a federal agency be able to address those issues. How can we develop things from even tools? One of the things we piloted in Washington State was called an Indigenous Guide. And I had elders from Alaska to Washington. The two piloted it, and I was a part of the team. And we actually came up with an Indigenous Guide. And what it is it's a training tool for our employees to kind of understand the Indigenous perspective. Understand when you're going out there and you're saying, well, I'll give an example. How I got with NRCS was my dad had a conservation plan, and the very first lady we got when I was in high school, you know what she told us? She told us, as we were trying to do a grazing rotation, that we should sell our horses and get cows. My last name is Rides at the door. Kind of evolved with them. To come in and to tell us to sell our horses was the wrong approach to go. So one of the things we tried to do in this guide is to have our employees in our agency be aware that things are a little bit different. You know, for example, our buffalo, we don't herd them like cows because they're very sacred to us. You know, we look at certain berries, they're very sacred to us. So to tell us to go out and you know, spray some of the weeds that are very, very good medicinal plants isn't going to happen. So it was a guide that we tried to adapt to help tribe, our staff understand tribes. Consultation, again, can be formal and informal. I think most of you know that. Essential consultation, it's been amazing because it's been really fun to have the 2 levels of consultation in our state, because it really does give us a good idea of what we can. And then it's very easy for me to go to the agricultural groups, different groups in our state, and say, by the way, did you know this? Or by the way, can you do this? And I think the biggest thing that I do in our state is be the bridge to help some of these organizations to understand that if we can work together rather than fight, that we can actually get a lot done. Again, consultation is a 2-way communication, and that's one of the things that we've tried to set up, was a way to, like I have one tribe in particular wants it different than other tribes. Can I have that flexibility in what we do in our operations and some of our standards and specifications to do that? And we're working on that. So again, building relationships through understanding. Again, our state association, one of the things that came out of that training was that our state association of conservation districts actually decided from that training that they needed a tribal outreach task force. And on that task force, they have tribal people now that are helping them to get information out to the local conservation districts and helping them to understand what tribes are about. This is a state organization. Well, just recently here in January, this organization took a resolution to the National Association of Conservation Districts, and they voted on it. And you're going to see now that National Association is going to have an outreach task force for tribes. Big move. Because it's the districts that really, really influence the Farm Bill. I already talked to you about the training. The other one here is an agreement with Makah Tribe, and the vice chair is here. And I'm fortunate a lot of the Washington tribes are here. But we entered into an agreement with them, and the tribe itself, it's a financial agreement, but they're basically looking through all of our agency authorities to define to us what they think their treaty rights are based on our authorities. Wow. And I hope from that we can develop an MOU that basically, again, the tribe is telling me based on you know, because we as agencies have our own vision what those authorities are, but it's been really cool working with the Makah to see it from the tribal perspective of what they think our authorities are. And then we sit down and say, yeah, that one, no, not quite. But at least now they're telling me, and we're hoping to come up with like a to-do list kind of thing of what I need to do as a federal agent to be able to meet their treaty rights. But they're telling me, rather just saying, oh, here's a treaty. And many of you know, even my own Blackfeet treaty is so much different than all the rest. So can I, as a federal agent, read all of them in my state? I deal with 31 different tribes. I will not keep them straight, I can tell you that. But to have the tribe tell me and what they think they need specifically to meet their tribal treaty right, wow. The other thing I did was an agreement with the Tulalip tribe. And that's another one that they're actually going to define and help us define this whole thing on climate change. USDA is really getting involved with the climate change and climate change hubs. So I wanted, again, a tribe to help us define what do you need from this? What do you see you need from this situation, instead of me going out there and saying, here it is. So we're hoping that they will be able to help us define that. So one of the things I was involved in, actually, I think we formed one of the first ones here in Arizona, was a tribal advisory council to the agency. And I was engaged in helping define and actually develop the policy. I actually got involved with developing the USDA Indian policy, which is kind of interesting because I had some people a few months ago saying, we didn't even know USDA had a policy. I have it on my wall. So one of the things we did in our policy as an agency is actually write into our policy that we have to have state advisory councils and regional advisory councils. So here in the picture, you will see this is the West Region Tribal Advisory Council. It actually met at the Wild Horse Casino here a couple of years ago. And so it is a regional one that is giving our leadership as an agency direction now. Interaction with headquarters, and Phil will know this picture. Because Phil was with me on this tour. It was his fault I got to touch one of these things. Those are lampreys. So this was an interesting project because getting our agency to understand that the lamprey for the Yakama Nation is very, very sacred, and it's a traditional food. You know, most of my planners and biologists would say, oh, we don't want anything to do with that. If you haven't seen a lamprey, they got teeth in their mouth, and they're really ugly. So this is our Deputy Undersecretary Ann Mills, and Yakama Nation was one of the first tribes in the country to get funding through our Regional Conservation Partnership Program, RCPP, and it's where you gotta have partners. And they had one of the highest ranking proposals in the country, and they were one of 3 tribes last year that got funded. And so what they're doing is, as you can see here, is habitat. But to get our agency to understand that even though it may not be on the federal threatened endangered species list, it may be an issue to the tribe, and we need to adjust. So Ann Mills was a good sport. Actually, she was a really good sport because she got up there, grabbed this lamprey and nothing, and looked at me and said, step up, girl, come on, we gotta show them USDA can do this. You gotta understand, I grew up in the mountains, we don't even have snakes. And I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna grab this thing and it's gonna wrap right around my arm and I'm gonna panic in front of all these people. And we had newspapers there and everything else, and sure enough, that sucker curls right around my arm. And I think, oh please, I can do this. So they had them put us in these buckets, and then we took in the 5-gallon buckets and we walked them down to the river and we actually released them. And there was a nice newspaper article, I think Paul sent me a couple weeks ago, that there are seeing some increase on the lamprey. So that's what we're doing through some of that. But again, listening to the tribes and seeing what they needed. So I wanted to show this picture. This is my home. This is where my grandma was from. This is Heart Butte. And like I said, my grandma is from this area. So I wanted to show you a picture of my home in an area that's very, very, means a lot to me. Actually, I did one of the very first grazing contracts I ever did with the agency was on this ranch right below this mountain. And I got to go back there about 5 years ago to do Sundance. And I hadn't been back in a long time to this area. And it was so cool to be able to know, oh, I know where we're going, I know this family, and I had helped them with the grazing plan. So again, thank you for your time today.